Hey, what's going on, you guys? Welcome to another episode. Today, we're going to talk about generational curses because I think it's important how we raise and how we teach these younger generations, because they are the future. Whether you want to believe it or not, whether you like it or not, they are the future. If we ever get old, those are the people that are going to lead the charge, that are going to take care of us. And I don't think that I don't think it makes sense to constantly bash them, or to constantly belittle them, and call them entitled, and call them mentally ill, and call them just all the different things. Where's our accountability in that? Where's our ownership in any of this stuff? Because we're supposed to be the ones that they look up to. We are the ones that they are supposed to look up to for guidance, for advice. Now, if you're a parent, you have probably raised your children in one of two ways. You were either too soft, or you were too hard, or maybe you were somewhere in the middle. But being somewhere in the middle seems to be very rare, if it happens at all. I think you either have the parents that try to be the best friend parents, and then you have the parents that are just controlling, helicopter parents. They're abusive. They're too disciplinary, and neither one of those techniques work. And I'm one to talk. Like, I don't have any kids, but if I did have kids, how would I raise them? I ask myself those questions all the time. How would I raise a son, or how would I raise a daughter? But most parents seem to go one extreme or another. But let's go ahead and talk about the tough parenting, because it's really important how you raise your children. I think people take that for granted. I really do. And I know it might be hard, considering, if there's, when they're born and they're still a baby, they might have colicky, they're crying, they might be crying 24/7, and they're waking you up, and you try to shut them up and nothing works. And they get into becoming toddlers, and now they want a toy, or they throw screaming fits in the grocery store, and it's embarrassing, and people see that, and they look down at you like you're a bad parent for not being able to control your kid, unless you crack the whip on them. And then they get into junior high, right? Which is where they start to, if you're a boy, your voice changes. If you're a girl, you start developing physically into a woman, and there's all these hormonal changes going on, and they start to get confused. They don't know what the hell is going on in the world with adults. They get into high school, and now you're dealing with hormones from hell. Like they start to get even more confused, and now like they want so really bad to impress all their friends at school. And so if you don't buy them a phone, well, then that makes you a bad parent, right? You don't want your kids to have any friends, right? So maybe if you're a best friend parent, you give them a phone. But if you're a tough parent, maybe you do give them a phone, but you're physically abusive, you're verbally abusive, maybe you have neglected it, or maybe you're just not in the picture at all. Maybe you haven't seen your kids in a long time. Maybe you took off when they were really little, and You know, they needed a dad, they needed a mom. It's really so important how you communicate with your children, how you respond when they act out, when they do something wrong, because they're going to take that with them for the rest of their life. And they're going to grow up, they're going to go out into the real world, and guess what? It doesn't just stop with you. It doesn't just stop when they're children. When they become adults and they go out into the real world, they're going to start to come across people that don't understand why they don't get it. You know, people that they feel like they have to micromanage because they didn't grow up the right way, because they weren't taught the right way. Or, you know, you'll have a bunch of these people, you know, these business owners, these CEOs of these companies, and you have these influencers, and you have these, you know, you have these podcast hosts, and you have these like conservative talking heads, and you have these liberal talking heads, and they're all talking about how horrible the younger generation is, and how difficult they are to manage, and how they're the worst generation that's ever walked the face of the earth, without giving them any guidance, without giving them any without having conversations with them, and without really ever getting to know them. They're just making blanket statements about how they're the most entitled, narcissistic, gotta have it my way, instant gratification generation, right? How does that help anybody? Especially if it's people that have had previous trauma in their life. And it doesn't just have to be caused by their parents. Maybe their grandparents, uncle, aunt, maybe they molested them when they were children. Maybe their teacher touched them when they were kids. Maybe their teacher berated them and called them names and called them stupid. Maybe, I mean, there's all these maybes, right? And you never really know what those maybes are until you talk to them. But we're not talking to them. We're we're not even making an effort to understand why they're struggling. Why are they falling behind? And I don't see that at all. I see a lot of just unimaginable potential in these young people. Now, I'm not that old, you know. I mean, I'm a pretty young guy still, but you know, I remember when they used to do that to me when I was young. You know, and so why would we keep doing? And neither did you. You didn't like that. You know, if you're 50 years old and you're watching this right now, you didn't like that when you were in your 20s and you were just starting out life, and these older people like your bosses, your parents, were telling you that you're a worthless piece of shit, that will never get anywhere, that will never amount to anything. How do are you starting to draw parallels here? The exact same thing is happening with these younger kids, but worse, because now we have all this indoctrination happening in schools. We have just like all this hormone therapy that's being prescribed to them, puberty blockers, CRT. If you're a white kid, you're being taught that you're evil and that you're racist. And if you're a black child or you're a Latino child, you're being taught that you don't fit into society, that white people don't like them, and that they have a target on their back. All these kids are being taught these things in school because it's easier now. These kids have no relationship with their parents whatsoever, and these educators are capitalizing on it. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not I'm not painting the whole education system with a broad brush, because I know that there are schools around the area that don't do that actually care about their kids. And so I'm not saying this about all teachers, but it's concerning. It's it's but again, it's because the parents are just out to lunch, like they don't care, and if they do care, they're not showing it the right way. There has to be a better way to raise up these younger generations. Now, I'm naming the title of this video Youth of the Nation. Youth of the Nation. And it's a POD song that came out in 2001. And listening to the lyrics, I want to say that it's in reference to the Columbine shootings. Now, I'm old enough to remember when the Columbine shootings took place. It was around April something of 1999, and I couldn't believe it. I was dumbfounded. I didn't know that something like this could even happen. It was unheard of at the time. And when you really look deep into these, these two young men that went and they murdered a bunch of kids, you have to think, what were their parents like? What was their environment like? Did they have a really hard time making friends because their parents weren't raising them the right way? Because maybe they had this idea in their heads that because my parents don't like me, why would anybody at school like me? Why isn't anybody asking those questions? Do I think that what they did was justified? No, of course I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, why are we asking questions? Why aren't we looking into the details of why these kids are acting out, or why these kids are rioting, or why these kids are buying off on a certain narrative? Why are we asking these questions? No, instead we're I'm hearing people all the time talking about how mentally ill these young kids are, and that they don't get it, and that they wish that they had the same opportunities that their children had, and that they're privileged. One more thing before I wrap this up, because I really got to get this off my chest. And I'm not going to call him out by name, because I still am a really huge fan of this guy. And I've been listening to him every week on Thursday, because he releases a podcast every Thursday. And I've been listening to him religiously for, I want to say, the last 2.5 years. But he's a veteran, and he's a well-known conservative influencer. And I heard a podcast the other day where he was talking about this conversation that he was having with his 11-year-old daughter in his car, and his 11-year-old daughter was depressed, and she just couldn't snap out of it, and she was just feeling really down. And I understand that too, because for me, it's different for everybody else, but for me, I have a I have a really hard time getting out of my funk. Like, it takes me a really, really long time for me to finally crawl out of whatever black hole I'm in. So I totally understand that, and I've been that way my whole life. Ever since I was a kid, I've been that way. And so he's talking about this conversation that he's having with his daughter, right? He's dropping her off at school, and I don't know if it was just pure frustration, or if it's because, I mean, the guy, he's got a lot of shit going on in his life that, might be really hard for him to deal with right now. And so he's taking it out on his daughter. And I heard him say that he told his daughter that, hey, you know what, if you don't snap out of it, you need to get out of my car and walk. I mean, dude, this is your daughter. I can understand maybe if you were talking to a son that way, because boys are more emotionally resilient than girls are. That's just science. But I wouldn't even talk to my son that way. How could you tell someone who's 11 years old that doesn't know anything about life, that doesn't know how to be, that doesn't know how to snap out of their depression or their sadness? How can you tell them just get over it or leave my car? How can you do that? And this guy, he'll probably never see this, but I know that he surrounds himself with people that are just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, man up, toughen up, like just very tunnel visioned, shallow people. I know that he hangs out with people like that, and he doesn't want to, he doesn't want them to single him out. He wants validation from them, right? I'm gonna tell you, man, right now, from one man to another, those people don't matter. Who matters right now is your family. If this whole world falls apart tomorrow, those people aren't going to have your back, bro. You're gonna need to stay by your family needs you. Those are the only people that love you, and that love you unconditionally. For this world doesn't matter. And I think that there are more important things in life to worry about than how you look to other people, or how much money you make, or how other people perceive you, or what your job description is, or how many followers, or how many likes, or how many subscribers you have on social media. None of that shit's gonna matter in the end. What matters is yourself, the people around you, your family, your closest friends, God, your relationship with God. That's about it. And if if you're a dad and you're in a situation like that, just no, I'm not necessarily speaking specifically to him, but you got to get your priorities straight. I don't care what's going on in your life. I don't care what problems you might be facing. I don't care what problems you might be having in your marriage right now. Be very careful with your children, because there's a lot of really fucked up adults walking around right now that are depressed, that are anxious, that that still need guidance, that 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 just don't know because nobody taught them. But you have the opportunity right now, while your children are still young, to teach them the way of the world and to teach them how to be kind. And hang on, this might be a lengthy video because Garrison wants to jump in here. If not, then I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up.
What's up, man?
Hey, what's going on?
Sorry, just need a sec. Just got home from work. Okay.
So Garrison.
I just kind of overheard a little bit. Let me get my headphones too. Since I just did a request.
Get your headphones on.
So I can hear.
Let's talk. People need to hear this. So, Garrison, just for my audience, you're a father. You have a son, and how old is your son right now?
Almost 4.
Almost 4. What advice would you have for other just from one father to to any father that might be listening to this right now? What would you have to say to them? What advice would you give them on how to discipline their children, how to listen to their children, how to be gentle with their what advice would you give them right now?
Well, I know a lot of parents would probably say like, oh, well, you got to be the parent, you got to lay down the law, which I understand. I kind of grew up that way too. I would say start communicating with your kids, even at a young age, even at an infant age. So many parents, especially dads, just check out, the stress from work, which, I can understand. Being present and communicating, I think, are big, especially for dads. Are you saying with moms too, or just? I can speak for myself. I mean, I guess with moms, well, I guess another thing too, having patience and again, like talking, not just yelling at your kids like, hey, don't do this, but explain why not to do it, or explain like, hey, we're not going to do this because, this can happen. You don't want this bad thing to happen, because they have to understand like there's consequences to your actions, pretty much. Because a lot of kids grow up not realizing or being pampered, or not even just pampered, but just not having to deal with some consequences for actions, and that can lead to unrealistic expectations of life in adulthood.
Okay. As far as far as discipline goes, what 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 would you say would what would you say would be um, too much discipline as opposed to trying to be the best, your child's best friend and just letting them do whatever they want, and versus being too harsh,
Yeah,
being too uh, you got a lot of parents that are super abusive towards their kids. They're physically abusive or they're verbally abusive. But how do you bridge that gap?
like how far is too far, or I'm trying to understand the question.
Yeah, how far is too far, and then how how yeah, basically how far is too far, and then how do you know that you're being maybe you're not parenting them, because like there are parents out there that will go the complete other
Yeah,
extreme where they won't teach their kids, and they give their kids a phone, and they're not really monitoring
right.
what they're doing
Well, that's part of
because
kind of what I said. Like, sorry, I interrupted you. Um, what were you gonna say?
so what's the middle ground between too much and then too little?
I mean, I can only speak for myself, but like, I do feel, again, you got to communicate. Um, and another thing that can happen is some parents like they try to be the good the parent, the liked parent, like the one that their kid or their child, their son or daughter or twins or whoever it is, like,
Mm.
oh, I'm the favorite parent, but it's also like, it's kind of what I said, being present and communicating like, hey, this is why we don't do this. If, like for example, if my son acts up, like I'll put him in timeout and that usually does the job. I know some parents will spank and I understand the reasoning behind that. The biggest thing I've learned is just to just to explain like, hey, this is why we don't do this. Obviously, if they're not listening, then there has to be a consequence because if you don't have that for them, then again, kind of what I said before, they don't learn like there's consequences to your actions, and that's really important to learn. Whether you're 1 years old, 2 years old, I mean, one, you're still kind of learning. I'd say maybe like two or three and above. It's a very important lesson to learn. Um, Maybe one and a half. I know for my son, when I explain to him or his grandma or his mom, he does listen, and you know, if he doesn't listen, then he goes in timeout. Another another point you were bringing up was tuning out with electronics. That's actually kind of a pet peeve of mine too. Um, I think it's good to have the TV, to have the entertainment and stuff, but limiting the time is good too. Making sure again that you're present. You're not just throwing your kids in front of the TV, but that you I saw a cool Instagram TikTok video, and it was kind of a joke video, but it was cool. The mom was finding ways to entertain her son without resorting to TV, which I thought was really cool. I think being creative in that way, encouraging your child to play, having toys, of course, is always a plus. I'm not saying to go buy all of, well, it used to exist, but Toys R Us or the equivalent of that nowadays.
Yeah, they brought that back.
Okay, well, there you go, right?
So it's right, not like as a whole store, but I think they're bringing it back in like some Target stores.
Yeah,
I mean, this is just what I've heard.
No, yeah,
Not like the old Toys R Us that we both grew up with and really loved. But
seriously, right? Our
uh,
age group and all that, yeah. Yeah, I just think there's the whole I'm not at that stage yet, but I always laugh like that scene in Mean Girls or whatever. Having three sisters growing up, you're inevitably gonna watch that like a million times. And where the mom's like, "Oh yeah, I'm the best friend," and you got I'm the cool mom.
yeah,
It's good to get along with your kids and have that open communication, but of course, like you gotta be the parent role. If you're the dad, you gotta be the dad. You gotta be that masculine energy, and
yeah,
you have to be that example. I always love the dads that you feel bad to disappoint, or even I'm sure you grew up with mentors, even if you didn't have the ideal dad growing up, whoever it is out there. It's like you've always had those mentors. It could be like, I guess for women, it could be another female mother, maybe even potential surrogate mother, father figure, or male role model or whatever. Um, but yeah, it's kind of like those words you hear. I'm not mad, but I'm disappointed, kind of thing. That's when it's like, oh man, I've messed up, and just I think yeah, I think just being present and opening that communication, and I think just in general, people learning to communicate better with each other, the world would be a better place, and um,
mhm,
people listening,
yeah,
uh, getting establishing like a good line of communication, like where you can talk to your kids, of course, um, but then being like, if you disobey me, there's consequences. So it's like
yeah,
it's always a thread. It's always a fine line. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying I'm the world's greatest dad in the world, but I do what I know, and I know that at least with my son, even at the age of 4, he's open when you communicate with him, and you tell him what's going on, and you tell him, hey, this is why we're telling you to do this. I'm not going to let my son, throw a freaking baseball at someone's head. I'm
yeah,
I'm going to take it and be like, look, you don't throw it because this is why. And if you're not listening, then we're going to stop doing the activity you're doing.
mhm,
So usually the takeaway is good. If they start crying, throwing a tantrum, sometimes you just have to ride the storm, as they say. You have to let them throw that tantrum, and they have to they have to learn. So I think so many
right,
parents are afraid of the discipline in terms of being firm
mm,
and being like, you can't do this. This isn't okay. You're going in timeout. I'm putting you in the other room. And they can
yeah,
kick and scream. I've had my son kick and scream, and I just let him cry it out. And then I go back in a bit later and I say, hey, are you going to stop doing what you were doing? Are you going to behave and listen? And it's funny because sometimes he'll be like, no. And I'm like, okay, then you're going to stay in here. He's kind of, even kids will test you. It's funny. I'm sure I did the same to my parents, and sure we
yeah,
all did that. But
yeah. I did too. Like even now at 32 years old, I still test my parents if I'm being honest.
yeah, but
uh,
I think it's I think just learning communication in general. And yeah, with kids, you have to provide the
yeah,
consequences, but it's kind of in general. So, um,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay,
just
so
just establishing from an early age, and also from an early age, trying to teach your kids how to listen, I think is very important. Not just how to speak, but also how to listen. And part of the listening is the discipline. So if you don't do the correct actions, or you're not listening to your parents, that's when the consequences come. So, and I'm not saying, you have to take them and grab the branch or the paddle, but I think the better method is they're watching TV. Okay, taking away your TV, taking away your phone. That's it. You can kick and
Yeah,
scream. I know I'm sure if they're teenagers, it's like World War III if that happens. No communication. But sometimes you got to lay down the law. So I can understand with parents now.
right. So one last question,
Yeah.
because I gotta wrap this up soon.
Okay.
Um, and this is a question not just for parents, but for people that aren't parents, people that are people that are leaders, people that are influencers. There's been this trend that's been going on for a few decades now, where people of older generations um,
Hmm.
consistently belittle people that are younger than them, because maybe, I don't know, maybe they grew up with different things than they did. I mean,
Okay.
this might go all the way back to the early 1900s, where people are starting to drive automobiles and their parents are just going like, "Oh, you kids in your automobiles, when we were your age, we used to ride horses."
Yeah, I get that.
That
I've been
that
having
kind of
those
thing.
thoughts, yeah, even lately too. I get it. Yeah.
And now the biggest elephant in the room right now is this younger generation. Not
Yeah.
not not so much our generation, but the generation after us, that people are labeling entitled. They're the first digital generation, so all they've really known was technology, right? Like the internet, social media, and so they don't know life outside of that. Plus, they've got all these mental health issues going on, and so people of older generations are calling them mentally ill.
Hmm.
They're unhinged, and that's where it stops. There's no looking into maybe their past history. How did they grow up? Did they have decent relationships with their dads?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a different thing than when we were growing up, dude. When we were growing up, if you had a bad relationship with your parents and you wanted to rebel against them, you broke curfew. You went out to concert, like you got crazy in mosh pits. You were, you know, you you did anything that you would know would automatically piss off your parents, right? But that's not what's going on right now. What's going on right now is that there's there there's at least a few groups of people that are in their ear 24/7.
Hmm.
They're getting their news, they're getting their education from the internet,
Hmm.
you know, social media, and that becomes their parent if their parents weren't necessarily good parents to them.
Yeah.
And so when you couple like already being estranged from your parents and having a bad relationship with your parents
Hmm.
with the influence of the internet and social media and like all these celebrities, these politicians, what would you say to people of older generations, or not even necessarily older generations, but people of influence, people that are leaders, people that are CEOs of companies, and they're finding it difficult to train their young employees. They're finding them hard to manage, right? And so the first inclination for them is to just give up and fire them or whatever.
Yeah. Are you
What
talking
would you
like,
say to those?
sorry, are you talking like boss employee
No,
relationship, or like
No, just in general, just people in general that are sort of looking at this new generation of kids as a problem, and saying that they're a lost cause and you can't fix them, and that they're mentally ill without looking into uh, you know what's going on with them. Why why are they acting? What do you have to say to people that that are overlooking what might be going on with these kids? What,
Yeah,
if there's any advice that you have to give them, what would it be?
well, it kind of goes back to what I said before. Be willing to listen, being willing to um, ask the questions, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
a boss employee level or whether it's a politician, citizen level. Um, I think it's also the responsibility of course, we could do a better job of listening and take into consideration like people's backgrounds, the way people grew up, the way they relate to the world. I mean, technology itself has changed the world in the past 20 years that I would say social media, of course. I mean, you would have to be living under a rock essentially to know that social media hasn't changed the world. Um, Seems to be the platform. People say Twitter too, but I think more people are engaged in Instagram and TikTok on average.
TikTok especially.
TikTok, yeah, for sure, especially for younger generations. And I feel even there is good advice, and there are people even our age in regards to relationships, giving good advice, in
Oh
regards
yeah,
to even fitness. I think it's a dichotomy of the older generations sharing their wisdom and doing
mm-hmm.
it in a non-judgmental way. We all know
Mm-hmm.
guys such as, and I know everyone's not a fan, but a guy like Jordan Peterson brings up some good points. Or I watched an
Yeah,
interview with Robert Greene, and he's an older guy too. He brought up some very good points. He's brought up just points in terms of work.
mm-hmm.
He has a book called 48 Laws of Power, which I
Yeah,
didn't read it in terms of being manipulative and controlling, but it was more in terms of like understanding work dynamics, understanding one of the rules I know was talking about don't outshine your master, meaning don't try to look better than your higher ups all the time because that'll cause issues. And he kind of went into detail about that. Um, not it's not a plug for the book, but brought up some good points. In terms of younger generations, however, exercising the power of free speech, we've always said this, since I'm sure all the dawn of time, at least in terms of the not all the dawn of time, but rather since the United States has existed, the Constitution has existed in a free speech country such as ours, that's what we were founded on, um, has existed, and more specifically English law, which brought up the Declaration of Independence. I can't remember the
yeah,
specific document. You know, but life, liberty, property, all that. Anyways, us exercising that right to voice our opinions, and I think another thing too is when we're young, we're idealistic, so we have to be careful when we're idealistic. Are we using our platform in a destructive way? And it doesn't just have to
mm-hmm.
be, let's say, kids robbing and looting because of Antifa, not even knowing what that's really all about, and that that whole it started out as a good message, like we all deserve rights regardless of our color or creed. We all deserve a voice,
Yeah,
but it can quickly turn into something bad if we're not careful. And when you're young, I think just being aware of that when you're idealistic, when you're making rational or rather irrational decisions, maybe
Hmm.
listen to some of those older people that are telling you, hey, I've seen this before. Let's say they grew up in the 60s or 70s. I've seen this before. I've seen what this can lead to. Because so many times we try to think, oh, we're all, well, our problems are unique to us and we're different than our parents. But the fact of the matter is that, yeah, we have social media. Yeah, we have more information and more exposure to certain medias and certain good and bad
Yeah.
media readily available to us.
Yeah.
Not all the information is good. Um, I like to listen to people who have wisdom, not just experience, but also wisdom.
Hmm.
People that apply the wisdom, um,
Yeah.
not just people that quote a bunch of. I mean, of course, you and I both grew up Christian, and I love Christian principles, but it's not just quoting scripture. It's also having said, like, I've applied this and really just trying to reach people on an emotional level too. I think if younger people used more, because younger people I feel tend to use emotion and based a lot of what they do on emotion because we just don't have the experience. So we do a lot of things based on how it makes us feel. Not just, I mean,
Yeah.
we're not spring chickens, but we're still relatively young in our 30s, you know.
Right.
But it's no, we often, I guess, when we're in our teens and 20s, younger, we do things based on how they feel, right? We take a certain substance because it makes us feel a certain way. And that ties back into maybe the way you grew up wasn't, you didn't have parents that were present in your life, or you just didn't have the ideal childhood, or whatever it is. Um, but it's still, I think if more adults appeal to like that emotional part of younger people and people maybe that have been through older men, women, however you
Yeah.
identify, would appeal to that emotion, but then
Mhm.
wrap it into logic as well. So it's, hey, I know how this feels. I know how it feels to go through this. I know how it feels to go through that.
Yeah.
Um, let's say it's a kid that they fell in with the wrong crowd. They made some bad decisions. If an older person were to come into their life, which hopefully they do, and be like, I know where this leads. Let's say they broke up, a guy breaks up with his girlfriend, a teenager or whatever, or a
Yeah.
young person. They go out, they get drunk, they drive drunk, they crash. God forbid they run
Right.
into another car. If somebody had spoken into their life and just said, hey, I was here at this point and I know where this road leads. And this is what I went through. I don't want you guys to have to go through this. It's like, wow, I really look up to this person. They're a cool individual. They get it.
Mhm.
They have wisdom, and they're sharing this with me. Maybe I should reconsider before I do something like that. It's not going to work for everyone. People are going to do what they're going to do, but
Mhm.
I just think on either side, whether you're a younger generation or older, you shouldn't just ignore what the other side thinks and feels. It's like there's a
Yeah.
reason our parents tell us things. There's a reason
Yeah.
people say it was tougher in my day. The kids aren't as tough
Hmm.
now. Men need to man up. Women need to do this. It's like, okay, some of that may be true, but it's also like, why is it, like you said, why are they acting the way they're acting? Maybe that
Yeah.
kid that's considering joining a gang, for example, is doing so because he's never had a father figure in his life. And maybe
Mhm.
all it would take is for him to discover something he enjoys. That's why I think after school programs are essential. And when schools cut back on that, it's extremely damaging to society,
Yeah.
um, especially in arts as well. I can say as an artist musician, I'm not an artist, but I'm a musician. Um, Super invaluable, and um, I think having those outlets too are crucial. Um, for in terms of the politicians, that connects to that. Not just thinking everything with a dollar sign for cutting back
Mhm.
programs.
Right.
I understand you have to allocate and budget money, which I understand, but I also feel
Mhm.
like those programs can be essential and can change kids' lives. I can say personally, I've done free shows for the Boys and Girls Club, and I've seen the work that they've done with the kids. I've had kids come up to one of our bands, and we just put on, a free little show for them. This is back in early to or mid 2000s, maybe like 2014, 2015 era, and just something like that was meaningful to them, and maybe kids that never picked up an instrument want to pick up an instrument. Something me and my band believe in doing. We believe in encouraging kids, not discouraging, not telling them they suck, not saying, hey,
Right.
hey, don't choose this profession, not saying, you know, more people need to inspire, and more people need to teach, and also allow feedback. Don't not just being a good teacher, but also still being teachable in certain ways, even as an adult. So just because you're an adult doesn't mean, you know, a younger kid, whatever, teenager can't say something that will resonate with you.
Right.
So it's just, um, I think both sides, more people would listen and more people would just be willing to take, because it is a
Mhm.
risk in a way. You risk getting hurt. I mean, when you're online, I mean, look at the comments. Some people post some motivational gym video. You always get those keyboard warriors that are like, oh, well, this is using fake weights or this guy's doing this. It's like, I get it. It's because you're behind a computer screen, but it's better, build people up. Older generations instead of say, well, it was tougher back in my day, say, hey, you know what? They're doing the best they can for their time, and their
Mhm.
standards are different than our standards. So you know
Yeah.
what? There,
Absolutely.
there's universal truths, but then there's
Mhm.
also standards based on your time period you're in. I mean, we could say people who rode horses to work, or they rode a carriage, had it way tougher than us, and they did for sure. But again, it was a
Right.
different time period, and I think the benefit of living in this day and age is there's information, way more information available. Um, there's a lot of information for free, so there really is no reason why younger people can't seek out information. But I also think that older people should make it as readily available as possible. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I just think for both sides, it's a matter of listening, and it's a matter of providing opportunities to listen and to have discussions and for stuff to actually get done. Because it's the same with work, man. When you work at a place and you don't feel like the company culture is that where they listen to you and you have a problem with someone, like that's the worst. You file a complaint and nothing's being done about it. That's the worst. And there are cases where it's legitimate harassment and things need to get you know, and people need to stop just being bystanders in their life and actually, if their job
Mhm.
is to help other people, say you're in an HR position or you have the
Right.
power to help people in that, or you're a politician, it's your duty to help people. And if you're not helping people, you shouldn't be in that platform. And I think there needs to be accountability. The voters should have an accountability, should give accountability to their politicians and say, instead of complaining if you're a Republican or a Democrat, liberal, conservative, instead of complaining, be like, hey, this person isn't doing what we elected them to do or what they promised us they were going to do. And they should have the power to, I mean, we have the power to vote on it or recall or impeach. But people need to stop just being bystanders and really not only get out there and vote, but make a difference in themselves first and then in their community second. So have a
Yeah.
happy household. Learn to listen to if you're in a relationship, listen to your wife, your girlfriend, or if you're a girl, listen to your husband, boyfriend. If you have kids, listen to them. If you have your parents, you may not agree with them, but try to hear them out and have patience in doing so and develop your skill to listen. Because
Yeah.
then when you talk, you can actually provide, even if you're not providing solutions all the time, you're at least hearing what the other side is saying and you're taking it
Yeah.
into consideration and you're going to grow and develop from there. And you're only going to be better and all your relationships will improve because of that. So that was a long-winded response, but it all starts with the ears, I say.
Yeah. 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 Um, so, um, great. That was awesome. Seriously, man. I want to go ahead. I'm gonna wrap this video up,
Yeah,
I want to end it with you like the other thing that I have to mention too is that over the last few years there's been this strong push to censor free speech
yeah,
and to censor people, like, I mean, even people that I don't necessarily agree with. Like, I don't agree with everything that Ben Shapiro says. I don't agree with everything that Andrew Tate says, or
yeah,
Jordan Peterson. But they have a right to say it,
right.
and I mean, like all this like safe space stuff that's been going on. That's another gripe that that these older generations have, is that, oh, those young people, they have to have their free space, their safe spaces.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, we didn't have safe spaces, and all that stuff, right?
But
Um,
they still had
but
the opportunity to speak their mind as they do now. So, but
yeah,
I get you.
and first of all, they didn't come up with the idea of safe spaces.
Right.
It's these teachers, it's these college professors, it's these older influencers. It didn't just fall out of the sky,
Yeah.
and now all of a sudden, they want these safe spaces. They want to change their sex. They want to do
Excuse
this.
me.
They want to do that. But as much as I am 100% a free speech absolutist, I I do think that we have a responsibility to ensure that our free speech is actually uh, conducive to other people's growth and, and inspiration. How are we communicating with other people? How are we teaching other people? How are we educating other people? Because you can say whatever you want, right? But whatever you might say might result in a positive response, or it might result in, you know, getting punched in the face, right? Or getting up. I gotta go wrap it up, but
Yeah.
I think, yeah, because it's gonna cut me off really soon.
Okay.
But I'm gonna go ahead and finish this off with saying, hey, just be careful with the words that come out of your mouth, and You
No
know,
disagreement there. Yeah.
whatever you